Hello, and welcome to our webinar, Adopting AI, Ensuring Technical Readiness. I'm Abby Lundberg. I'm a business technology researcher and writer, and president of Lundberg Media. I'll be moderating today's discussion. So this webinar is third in a four-part series on adopting AI. In our first installment, we discussed how to pick the right problems to solve with AI. In the second, we explored how to ensure business readiness. And today we look at whether your organization is technically ready to put AI into action. We'll share best practices and a framework to assess your own technical readiness. You'll learn how to communicate why AI requires a different approach, how to overcome the main technology barriers, and how to achieve explainable AI. Our speakers will share insights from a broad range of industries with a special deep dive into AI use cases, benefits and challenges in the financial services sector. Kimberly Nevala will start things off. Kimberly is a strategic advisor at SAS and an expert in the areas of advanced analytics, information governance, and data-driven culture. She helps clients understand both the strategic value and the practical realities of artificial intelligence and digital transformation. Kimberly will be followed by Ritu Jyoti, Program Vice President for Artificial Intelligence Research at IDC. Ritu leads the development of IDC's thought leadership for AI research and manages the worldwide AI software research team. Her work focuses on the state of enterprise AI efforts and global markets trends for the rapidly evolving AI and machine learning innovations and ecosystem. She also provides guidance to the AI technology vendor community on how to best articulate their value proposition. Jose Murillo established and leads the analytics business unit at Banorte, the second largest financial group in Mexico. His group is recognized as a success story within the data and analytics industry, having created billions of dollars of value with analytics during his tenure. This particular case has been published on HBR.org and Forbes.com as an example of a company that has made its analytics investments pay off. Prior to Banorte, Jose was a top-ranking official at Mexico's central bank and participated for more than a decade at the Monetary Policy Committee. He has served as an advisor to the International Monetary Fund, leading missions to several Latin American countries. So welcome to all of you, and Kimberly, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Abby. Okay, make sure my technology is actually working here. All right, so I'm going to kick things off today by highlighting 4 aspects of artificial intelligence that create technical difficulty. Now, the first consideration is not a new technology per se, but an approach to deployment that we have not necessarily adopted holistically yet in the analytics realm. And I'm talking specifically about extending the use of microservices and elements such as containers, such as Kubernetes, to be able to deploy incremental building blocks that individuals can then use to assemble or mix and match in situ based on their individual needs. Now, those building blocks could run the gamut from accessible data pipelines to executable models to customizable dashboard components. The complexity with AI, however, is that model code, even if it's perfectly packaged and it's ready for execution, is always in development. AI systems are dynamic, so the code is constantly adjusting itself based on the inputs and the environment that it's exposed to. And what this means then is that AI algorithms require constant care and feeding. And providing that level of always-on heightened vigilance, which, depending on the aspect of the system we're talking about, you may hear referred to as either data ops or machine learning ops, is a key technical challenge. And this is a challenge that's further exacerbated by the fact that artificial intelligence systems are increasingly embedded into the fabric of our business processes and the core of our products and services. And there are a number of implications as artificial intelligence becomes ambient and integrated in this way. A lot of the conversations we see in the public today focus on this very important issue of data representation or having representative data and issues caused by things like data drift. But it's really important to understand that how a person understands the system and how they engage with the system can also have an outsized impact on the system's performance. In fact, it may turn out that this was the critical factor in the recent Tesla crash. But even if your system operates perfectly, even if the operator, the human involved, engages with it in the way that you intended, these systems can become obsolete over time, sometimes by design. So consider a very simple application to promote better eating habits. If that application works as intended and you're successful in changing my behavior, your odds are, questionable, but if you were successful in changing my behavior, the conditions under which or for which that model was trained have now also changed. And the model itself may become outdated or even irrelevant. And this is a continuous cycle. And it happens, I'm going to say, ad infinitum. And it's an incredible challenge because there are a lot of other things in the AI ecosystem that are actively evolving at the same time. So we are today doing research and development on core capabilities that we are at the same time applying to applications in real life. So certainly what we're going to find as we move forward is that some of the algorithms and techniques we use today are not going to go the distance. But even more importantly, this means that we are learning about the limitations and the fallibilities of these systems as we go. So a lot of the early stories that we saw about systems that were found to be grossly biased or just morally questionable weren't developed with ill intent. But the teams involved just did not think about how that system would manifest itself in real life. And this has led to a rise in discussion around the need for responsible technology, for AI ethics, the advent of regulations, and capabilities such as decision intelligence. Now, all of that is, I think, a long-winded way of saying that we cannot assess that technical performance is not the only component we need to be aware of when we assess technical readiness. Because in the case of AI, system performance can only be evaluated in the context of technical performance, human readiness, and the ecosystem in which the AI system itself operates. So with that as a starting point, I'm going to pass the baton over to Ritu, who's going to talk about the technology pillars for AI.
Very well put. I couldn't agree more with you, Kimberly. These are like exciting times. There's so much advancements happening in the field of technology of AI. But as you rightfully said, this is not about just technology readiness. It's a combination of, the organization readiness to adopt technologies, emerging technologies like AI. So let's go to the next slide and walk through how and where we are seeing it and how do we kind of make sure that we're ready there. So if you could click the next thing. So today, AI and ML is everywhere. Customer experience is rapidly evolving to be the new brand. In fact, it's considered to be more than the pricing and the other metrics, and contact center AI solutions are being built to provide 24/7 customer support and self-service in a very natural way. If you click the next one, Kimberly, digital businesses with high risk exposure are adopting AI-based online fraud analysis and detection platforms. Next slide, if we go, we actually see that in the similar fashion, AI has countless applications in healthcare, whether it is being used for discovering links between genetic codes, streamlined radiology, and pathology. The list goes on and on. And another very pertinent example, if you click the next one, is that we all know, we all have been in the field of internet. We have seen, getting personalized recommendations. The same thing is happening in the enterprises today, right? So advancements in reinforcement learning algorithms are being used to provide tailored product recommendations to boost engagement, conversion, salespeople are being provided AI optimized next best action based on sales stage, win probability, and best practices. So the net of it is that AI ML is everywhere, but are we really ready to take it to scale? Where are businesses in their journey? So if we go to the next slide, this is something, we have done extensive research here at IDC, and we've seen that AI adoption is a journey, and the maturity, we have classified them into 5 different stages. On the left hand of the spectrum, we call them jokingly AI laggards, and on the right hand side, they are the disruptors. So what do the disruptors do differently, and what can you do to kind of navigate through this journey? There are 5 dimensions of maturity that we kind of look into. The first and the foremost thing is that you really need to start, what is your corporate strategy? What is your vision? Where are you going to make use of AI? And focus on the right use cases and the right business outcome. The second is, we all know there's shortage of data science talent, but is there a readiness from a culture perspective as well? Are you kind of putting together a framework? There is constant ongoing, training, reskilling, empowering of the individuals in your organization. Are you just taking your legacy business processes and automating it or embedding it with AI powered? Absolutely not. This force yourself to look into newer business models, reinvent your efficiencies. We'll talk a lot more about the technology, but we cannot emphasize enough about the importance of data readiness. Data readiness is really slowing down. In fact, a significant amount of initiatives have actually failed because of lack and quantity and quality of data. Sometimes it's not just about the quantity, it's more about the quality. And are you picking up the right feature sets to empower your business predictions and outcomes? So if we go to the next slide, I always start with the very fundamental thing that businesses and organizations need to think about. Are they going to build it or they buy it? I mean, this is a very fundamental, foundational element of conversation, and I can go long on this aspect, but if I have to give you a 10,000-foot overview, we have done some extensive research and happy to talk offline, but the idea here is that don't reinvent the wheel for something which is a commodity. If you want to take some translation APIs, you can just buy it off the shelf. There's no uniqueness or there's no differentiation for you. There's no competitive differentiation, no data differentiation. But on the other side, suppose if you actually at the outset recognize that the technology alone will not solve the problem, and you also have certain things which is unique to your industry, there's some industry regulations, if you don't feel comfortable. So on the left-hand side on the top, you see where I have put that risky. It's basically when the competitive differentiation is AI high. There's an example of a very interesting company that I kind of interacted with is that, so Eligo Research, a healthcare enabling research organization, it partnered with Summer Technologies, and they looked into some kind of a, model where they could get that external talent who actually were AI and ML experts aligned with their business domain experts to kind of build the solutions. In that case, you could decide on building, but you could also do, outsourcing or partnership. On the top hand side, I'll give one more example here is that, if you really, really feel that there's something that you have treasured, something unique, like I give you an example, there was a global tire manufacturer who developed an AI platform in-house to predict the demand. And they had tons and tons of data that they had accumulated, from their public and private data points. And it was unique and treasured opportunity for this manufacturer, and their company risked losing on competitive insights. So they built it. But again, and in some situations, you would do, buy it and customize it. So if you go to the next slide, please, Kimberly, the 3 different dimensions, and, it's specific to use cases, one size doesn't fit all. But, in certain cases, there are embedded AI applications. You'll just go ahead and buy it and use it. In some cases, you will actually go ahead and use either commercial platforms and build it and customize it, or sometimes you could actually buy some things, some AI embedded application and customize it as well. So with that, if we go to the next slide, I think Kimberly hit the nail on this topic, that there are certain things that we were already good in doing from the analytics side, but AI and ML is dynamic. It's not a static, it's an ongoing learning. It's a continuous loop of collaboration between the machine learning, the operations, the different personas. And the most pertinent point here is about there's a data drift and concept drift happening. It's not just the software code that is being deployed, there's data dependency. And because of your business rules changes, this could be needing tweaking. And this was exacerbated during the COVID. A lot of these algorithms which worked well, they had never experienced this kind of a situation. And if they were not tuned for, this dynamic drift, things started falling apart. So couldn't emphasize more on the importance of making sure that you are aligning with the right set of your existing DevOps best practices. Think about MLOps right from the outset and think as to how you kind of put the right responsible concepts. And I'll talk further on it. But if I go to the next slide, Kimberly, I think this is very, very pertinent. In order for businesses to scale, the feature store has suddenly become a hot topic in machine learning. I mean, and this is also about, not reinvent the wheel. Not if one part of the business is done. I mean, over a period of time, I see this kind of collaboration across different organizations, but that's not happening today. Even if you start within your own organization, different parts of the business could have the central repository of all the features, and this can help automate this feature engineering process, which is an important part of the MLOps cycle. And this last slide that I just talked about, and this has become a key piece of data infrastructure for machine learning platforms. And some of the very large organizations and companies have built their own proprietary one, but there are commercial solutions being available right now. And this will also help businesses to kind of, accelerate their journey and, share things between them and not reinvent everything. There's a lot of innovations happening in this space. In the interest of time, I'll just kind of see that this is very important. Be on the lookout. There are some shortcomings in the current solutions, but the rapid innovations happening there. If we go to the next slide, Kimberly, I think I cannot emphasize more on this topic where Kimberly mentioned that, the use of containers, Kubernetes, Kubeflow, let's step back even for a minute and think that, the cloud native model has completely revolutionized how enterprise applications are deployed today. It is helping in speeding innovation, reducing costs. It's time to bring these same advantages to machine learning and other forms of AI. So, a cloud native environment basically helps, is built on containers, is the most effective and efficient way to do rapid development. And every stage of the process, people think, oh, it's just about the deployment phase. No, even in the exploration phase and the training phase, containers are extremely helpful to the personas involved, whether it is the business analyst, whether it's the citizen data scientist, whether it's the hard code data scientist. It really, simplifies, provides the flexibility. More and more training will happen at the edge locations today. So this will really benefit by embracing this model, this whole microservices architecture, isolated in the container environments, accelerate this the productivity and also sharing, right? I mean, third-party ISVs could expand upon your innovation and take it to the next level. And while, there are some commercial versions of Kubernetes, look for, if there is a company that has kind of brought some, enterprise grade level maturity, scalability, security to it, so that it can really blend and adapt well with your enterprise requirements. So microservices will make it easier for you to deploy models in parallel. And all of this in together is really, really unique, but it is rapidly advancing and helping businesses. So next slide, again, this is another very, very heavy topic and we can go at length, but I will introduce you that these are, IDC, we have developed this, these are the foundational elements of responsible AI. And as you embark in this journey, or even if you're ahead in your journey, make sure that you're taking care of from both, the tools and techniques perspective, but also your whole readiness in terms of which use case you're embarking on, and whether you're making sure you have the right tools and techniques for bias detection, you're choosing the right, algorithms, you're making sure that, the data scientists have the interpretability techniques to assess the impact of what features make an impact. You have the right explainability tools, and I can go on, but before it needs to be transparent. You can track the whole data lineage for your governance purposes, and make sure that the platform that you're using for developing and deployment is actually free from any kind of adversarial attacks. So next slide, Kimberly. This is many times people come and ask us that, is it just the data scientists? Is it just the IT personas who are involved? No. You need to put together a corporate governance, and it will vary from one company to the other. This is just a framework that you could use, but make sure that your compliance officers, your chief data officers, your trust officers, your transformation officers, and all the personas who are involved in the cyclic loop are involved. You could start with your industry specific, your geography specific regulations. Don't reinvent the wheel completely. Use your existing policies and existing frameworks and build on and augment to it. And where there are gaps, significantly improvise on it. But make sure that before you get into your scaling the AI business, that you have a corporate governance, you have an AI governance in place. So it's something, nothing is perfect, right? I mean, there's a lot of FUD going on that, AI is not ready. AI is can be related to some horrifying stories. The reality is that it's upon you as an individual, as an organization, to make sure you have putting the right checks and balances in place. And if something, God forbid, goes wrong, what are the corrective actions that you can take? But if you have the right checks and balances, you mitigate those risks in a very elegant fashion. So with that, if you go to the next slide, please, Kimberly. I think it's, I would like to just wrap it up. So this is over to Jose, and hopefully this gives you a sense that while AI is making a lot of headways, in order for you to take pilots to production in a successful and a meaningful way, these frameworks and these best practices, which has been gathered from a lot of your peers, will help you in this journey. Thank you so much, and over to you, Jose.
Thank you, Ritu. I'm delighted to be here with you today, and I'd like to share you my experience in this transformational journey that I've been embarked for the past 6 years at Banorte, where Banorte it's a large bank in Mexico that 6 years ago, it was the 4th largest in the system, with a declining ROE. And at that point, Banorte decided to transform itself to become a data-enhanced organization. Time has proven us right. Through AI and data science projects, the organization has yielded more than $4 billion in net revenue for the past 6 years. We leapfrogged international competitors such as Citibank and Santander to become the 2nd largest financial group in Mexico and the most profitable one in the country. So this is, as Abby said, it's a success story. What I would like to do during this webinar is to share with you some of the cases that have been that we have advanced with AI, and how we focused on them. As Ritu was saying, you need to focus on the right use cases and have a very frank discussion of what were the challenges that we met. How basically we are using AI to yield very high returns on investment. Last year we yielded about 250 times our cost. And what are the true challenges that we were facing during the implementation of AI projects. So let me start off with one of the first use case that we did. When we started our journey, one of the first projects that we undertook was to have an analytic redesign of the credit card cross-sell process. After a couple of years, that took us to have one of the best-in-class processes in Latin America. We won global awards for what we had, but somehow we were not satisfied yet. We achieved very high conversion rates for a mature product such as a credit card, and but we thought that we could do better, and we started to use speech-to-text algos to understand much better the interactions between our customers and our executives, and somehow artificial intelligence revealed that we needed to boost our natural intelligence that we were using in the process in those conversations to keep those conversations relevant. And in some sense, that worked very well. We also wanted to have artificial intelligence to help us through the whole cross-sell process, through the conversations that we were having with the customers. And what was really successful was the light that artificial intelligence shed on the process, that we needed to improve the way that we were talking to the customers. That really boosted the conversion rates by an 80% rate, from about 18% conversion rate to something in around 35% or no. Yeah, about 35% conversion rates. And but something that was really a challenge was the infrastructure. And since we operate in Mexico, the latency on which we were trying to coach executives while they were talking in real time with the customers, that kind of didn't really work. And that's something that the technology was very relevant on and imposed significant restrictions on what we could do and what we couldn't do. The second case that it's relevant, and on the next slide that I'm talking about is on risk. And at the juncture that we are right now during the pandemic, that we need to have a much better risk assessment of our customers, it calls for basically having new data and new techniques that allow us to have a much better understanding of the risk that our customers are truly facing. We don't want to discard good customers because they are facing liquidity problems during such a period, but we need really to have a better understanding of the customers. And so fortunately, before the pandemic, we started to upgrade all our admission risk models, and I guess one of the big restrictions that we were facing to implement these projects that really improved the way on which we're reading the risk profile of our customers was data literacy across the corporation. And that's a point that I would like to emphasize. To be technically ready about to adopt AI, that means that the corporation or the organization is open to test new things, and they need to understand what's going on. And one of the best investments that we made during this period was to set up several data science workshops on which different verticals from the group understood what was about artificial intelligence, data science, and they have a further understanding, and that helped us to go at a faster pace. The third use case that it's illustrated by this cartoon, it's that right now everything is about to really accelerate the learning about your customers and to really have a large impact on the way you're doing things, you need to understand the causality of your interventions. And so this is kind of like a general use case that I'm talking about, and it's we set up a factory of ideas upon which we were setting up different interventions that would go to try to lift barriers in the interaction with the customers, having the right price, different behavioral nudges that we wanted to try. But then all of those experiments by nature and to be accepted by a corporation, they need to be small, of a small scale, and whatever works, you need to scale it up. And to scale it up, we were using machine learning causal algorithms to be able to find the right population to which we wanted to apply those interventions. And I'm particularly proud of how we incorporated new knowledge in the academia into the business, because these causal machine learning algos, they were basically published in 2015 by a Stanford professor, Susanati, and it took us about 3 years from publication to implementation, and that's something that I guess to be technically ready for AI means that you have the human readiness that Kimberly was talking about. You have the brain power within the corporation to adopt the new knowledge that is being produced around the globe. And that takes me to 3 key ingredients that I think that are relevant in this story. And the first one, it's data. And that's a point that was made previously by Ritu. And you need to have the data that you have, you need to have it well organized, and then to have the technology to be able to exploit it, and the human power to use it correctly. But data, it's the data that you have. I think there's something that is very relevant. It's within the organization. There needs to be this understanding of the power of data and how you need to the value that it has to improve the business. The second point on the key ingredients that I want to make. Oh no, this is again the artificial intelligence versus natural stupidity slide. No, and it's no, really, without joking, it's the technology that you need to have the right technology to exploit the data. And there's a balance, because technology is developing really fast. And you need to keep a balance between how much you dedicate to explore new technologies and how much you are pursuing the projects that are going to deliver the return on investment that you need to really transform the organization. But at the end of the day, I guess the third key ingredient is that you need to have the talent within the organization to be able to transform it. And that, what I mean by the talent, it's you need to have the people that are understanding about the data, the technology, and then the brains that are exploiting that. And those brains need to be able to be technically proficient, but they need to develop knowledge about the business and also develop this capacity to communicate complex ideas in a simple fashion to the business. And at the end of the day, to have the intrapreneurship traits that are willing to push forward the agenda. So at the end of the day, I think that having AI means that the whole organization needs to be able to understand that there's, when there's an elephant in the room, that it's evident that that you're going to acknowledge it, and that you're going to try to challenge it, and you're convincing you're challenging the conventional wisdoms that you have within the organization with one, and that at the end of the day, that the organization is willing to tame the hypo, the highest paid person opinion. It cannot be the only one brain that it's thinking in an organization. And when you are, and being AI technically ready also means that the organization is willing to undertake risks, to challenge conventional wisdoms, and to test different and experiment different hypotheses. And to be able to do that, I guess my final comment, you need that the whole corporate, it needs to be a change in the mindset of all the corporation, and be willing to be everybody to be learning constantly and keep close to the centers of knowledge, so that you can be really at the forefront of what's going on in the world. Thank you very much. It's back to you.
Great. Thank you all. That was terrific. And it was interesting to me that you all said that technology readiness isn't just about technology. You all talked about engagement with stakeholders across the business and new approaches to collaboration, and that cycle that Ritu talked about, and of course data. And Jose, you talked about when it comes to technology, it's developing really fast. So there's just sort of this sense of we all need to be involved. We all need to be paying attention and thinking about all these different aspects. So we have some really great questions coming in from the audience, and we will continue to take your questions for the remainder of the hour, so keep them coming. You can submit these by entering them into the questions module in the GoToWebinar panel there. So to kick things off, Juliana would like to know, where are we today when it comes to predictive analytics, both in terms of where the market solution's at, but also the state of practice within organizations? And I'll just leave that as an open question to all of you, and you can chime in as you want.
Maybe Ritu, you can start, and Jose, you can provide some examples in real life.
Yeah, sure. I'll start with a very simple, easy example, right? I mean, if you think about from AI ops that I talked about, people were really reactive when a failure happened in one of the part of the infrastructure, or one of the issue in the network or anything. But now with the advancements in machine learning and deep learning, people can actually use, and they're actually using it right now, that they can do some predictive maintenance and prescriptive maintenance and analytics as well, right? So it can provide you the recommendation that, okay, this is a forthcoming problem. You could move the load from this particular VM machine to the other, this containers isolation. You could automatically open a field level ticket. So this is just from a business, general horizontal function. I'll give you another example, which is very, very common in the, say, manufacturing industry, if you see, right? So in manufacturing, predictive, instead of time and usage-based, maintenance, which is extremely costly, and a lot of times it doesn't need it. It's more driven to condition-based, and that is predictive, and you also prescribe action to what you should do it. So
let me share with you a beautiful example. During the pandemic, everybody needed to have a much better understanding on how the economy was going to bounce back and when will that happen. And that would give an edge to any company that understood clearly when will that inflection point would happen. So around April of last year, my team, which was more dedicated to the business side, decided to have a short-term forecast on Mexican GDP. And we were starting to use our own data from the bank, coupled with traditional macro and financial data series. And we've been producing, we have not published that forecast, but it turned out that after the first month that we were doing that, we have the most accurate prediction of GDP among professional forecasters that have been doing that for their whole life. And that's the amazing power that you have when you use non-conventional data coupled with modern estimation techniques, and that some of you might have a lot of industries that get disrupted by newcomers. And this is a very simple example of someone who never had, of a team who never forecasted a macro variable, but decided to use new data sets and new techniques and suddenly you are the best forecaster in the country. And that kind of like shows you the power of what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Kimberly, in your experience, how widespread is this kind of thing?
I think it's very widespread. I mean, the sort of rudimentary level of predictive analytics is forecasting, and everyone's been doing that for a long time. But the examples that Ritu and Jose have highlighted show, I think, what the trend is now, which is we're able to make predictions in a much more compressed time frame and using information that is much more contextual and relevant right now. So it's actual conditions on the ground. And I think that's actually pervasive, and it's progressing very fast. And in some extent, as Jose said, the COVID has accelerated that, but this was already happening. We have retailers that were already forecasting demand in a 90-day cycle, and they are now forecasting demand for hundreds of thousands of SKUs or products on a weekly basis. And in some cases are getting that down to like intra-week periodicities. So this ability to be really contextually relevant and to create these predictions much faster, and as Jose said, using different elements of data seems to be the new sort of forefront right now. And I think we're just going to continue to see that accelerate. So predictive analytics are here to stay, and they're just being super powered with some of these artificial intelligence techniques.
And I think part of Juliana's question was also about market solutions, like how easy is it to go out and just get something that's going to help you do that?
So I'll let Ritu speak a little bit about that broadly, but one of the things that we're seeing now, and there's a lot of partnerships that are happening, but things like streaming analytics or edge analytics, right? So you've got, you know, a whole predictive universe in your phone that we're walking around with, and these are enabled by things like the IoT in conjunction with advanced analytics and all of these components by partnerships. And a lot of these solutions are available off the shelf today. And Ritu, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. I think you alluded to it in the build versus buy discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. There are tons of solutions available. Nobody really needs to, and it depends on the industry and the use case. And Kimberly talked about a couple of IoT use cases. It's very prevalent in retail, and we can chuckle a little bit about it. I was speaking to a customer who said that, you know, they were using an off-the-shelf solution to predict how much money needs to be kept in the automated teller machines. Right? So it's a lot of saving of, you know, the paper, not printing so much. So it's pretty prevalent, you know, in the manufacturing sector, in the IT, AI ops sector, in forecasting and demanding, the whole supply chain logistics. I can go on and on. Where it happens is there, you know, in some cases, subject to your domain, subject to your unique requirements, you may buy something off the shelf and customize it a little bit, either yourself or in partnership with the vendors. But over a period of time, I mean, this is something, another very important topic that I always talk about is that, you know, vendors should not and are not building all the solutions because there's so many dimensions to it, right? So what they're doing is that they're providing you the foundational elements, the intelligence layer. This is an architectural shift happening in the industry that vendors are doing the innovation for the core foundations, giving you the tools and techniques and the elements that you can build upon it and customize it. And something which becomes table stakes, commodity for the lack of a better word, that will be done. But the innovation will be in partnership and some of the unique situations. But to net it all, it is widely available.
Great. And we have an email question specifically for Jose. And the question is, how did you get buy-in for the program that you're describing?
Initially, there was, I guess, you need to build credibility. And I'll be very frank, there's a mixture of yeah, you know, dedication and doing the right things, but also there's luck. And for us, and for me, that meant that initially there was some resistance at the, I guess, at the organization of doing such a program. And they requested for us to yield on the first year 10 times our cost. And I thought it was kind of steep, the demand, because a traditional business, they were asking to yield 2 times our cost. But I was, I guess, fortunate and lucky that my boss pointed out, and he said, well, you should, if don't worry, you'll be able to do it. And if you focus on risk abating projects, that should do the trick on the first year. And he was right, and that was kind of like pointing me on the right direction. And on the first year, we yielded not 10 times, but 46 times our cost. So that the results kind of like give you a lot of credibility, and when it's something that it's very, I focused initially on cost abating projects that are. It was something, to tell you the truth, it was not something that I thought much about it, but after the fact, I think they have the advantage that you can demonstrate the effect very quickly, and the impact on the bottom line comes very quickly, in contrast to income generating projects that you need to, if you're suddenly selling much more credit cards, then there's the question of if those cards are going to be more or less risky, if they are going to survive more or less than those that you sold before, and it requires some leap of faith in some sense. Initially, for us, that meant credibility and the willingness of the organization to embrace what we were doing. I guess the second thing is that since we were on a declining return on equity trend, that meant that the organization needed to do something differently to get back on track. So there was the willingness to do it. And I guess nowadays, most of our projects are income generating projects, and not, there's a limit on how much cost you can cut. But that, I think that are two elements that really helped.
That's a really interesting example and great insight. Thank you for that. The next question is from Nasrin, and it has to do with company size. What do you see in terms of technological readiness for small and mid-sized enterprises? And do you think that SMEs can also benefit from AI, particularly in line with manufacturing and the Industry 4.0 paradigm?
I can take it. Absolutely. This is not just meant for the large enterprises. Remember that 2x2 thing that I was sharing about, build versus buy, and, it's the competitive. There's tons of stuff, a lot of the SMEs, they are trying to kind of, be focused, be leveraging off-the-shelf solutions with some minimal customization. Something can be good enough. In fact, in our research, we have seen sometimes the large enterprises are more challenged because sometimes they tend to boil the ocean. And sometimes they think about putting this holistic governance framework and end-to-end. I would like to kind of zero on with what Jose said. And, as per our research, tie this to the older question as well, that the prior question, sorry, is that focus on some quick wins. That is the key to winning trust. Some of us have been in the industry for a long time, and I know that data warehousing projects went on and on and on with no tangible ROI. Let's not get into those mistakes. The other it's a word of wisdom, not from me, but from one of my favorite end user, who told me that, you could use AI, the low-hanging fruits in areas where nothing has been ever done. So he used somewhere where there were a lot of hanging accounts, where the money was held up, and it was like a sunk cost for the company. And they used, advancements in NLP and machine learning to kind of get the, payments done proactively, figure out where they were held up, what they could do, take some corrective action. So it was a win-win situation. So again, to reiterate, it's AI is for everyone. We see a difference that larger companies are focused on certain different outcomes. Smaller companies are focused on some different outcomes. Always start with your business focus. What are you trying to achieve? Show some quick wins to win your trust, then scale it.
Great. You all talked about data and the importance of having your data in good shape before you start applying to AI. And so this question is from Arthur. In terms of data readiness, how are firms handling the trade-offs between data optimized for traditional BI analysis and data optimized for ML ops? Is it just running data warehouses and data lakes, or data mesh or data lake houses, or something else?
So the short answer to that question is probably yes. I think that, and I don't mean that, you know, to be funny, in that what we see now, and the catch-22 today is that in a lot of ways we're talking about delivering much more targeted, relevant, and timely insights in much smaller bits, but the environments that support all of these types of analytics are much more heterogeneous. So you need the data lakes and the warehouses, and the idea of things like data fabrics are to provide a level of abstraction so people don't necessarily need to know when and where all of those components are. And in the same way we think about transforming, Jose is talking about transforming the customer engagement model with their end consumers, we have to transform the customer engagement model with our internal data consumers. And so this idea that we now are able to, and in fact, Ritu, you talked about a feature store, to be able to, you want to almost think about this, for instance, with your data pipes or your feature stores or different models that are being developed. We want to be able to capture once and access anywhere, or model once and deploy anywhere. And it requires us to start to think about that architecture in the same way it's sort of the Netflix of data and analytics, right? We want people to be able to subscribe to the things and the inputs that they find interesting, and to be able to use those in the way that they want to use those. One of the really interesting things here, though, and you'll see this in all of the top trends over the last couple of years and in the future trends, is this idea of things like augmented data management, where we're actually using analytics and AI to really automate and speed up our ability to ingest, curate, integrate, and serve up information for use. So the old models of how we loaded and managed information into those lakes and warehouses, even the need to move them around and between those different structures to make them ready for different use cases, the thoughts about, for instance, master data management, where we always have to create one singular master record, are really sort of going out the window. So to make use of them and to do that, again, like I think about, you know, the mental model we talk about is think about serving up your data and analytics in the same way that you serve up customized viewing within Netflix. But it does require us to transform a little bit of the way we think about architecting and operating those pipelines.
If I can add, I mean, such beautifully you articulated it, Kimberly. I mean, Spartan. I mean, if I have to add, you know, a couple of things to it, is that you know, I'll give you a small example. You know, the escalator, if you're building a predictive maintenance model for an escalator, 99.9% of the time it's working fine. So all the data, sensor data that you're collecting for all of that time is immaterial. You don't really need that. Cybersecurity scenarios, if you look into it, right? I mean, a lot of times certain problems that you run into has never happened before, right? So there are advancements in unsupervised learning techniques where you can do dynamic on-the-fly training and learning. But I would also like to say that finding the right set of features, as Kimberly reiterated from about the feature store, is that finding the right set of features that you could leverage, which will have the maximum impact on your prediction and optimization, is more important than having the volumes of data, right? So I think Jose also mentioned that look into what data set is adding value. So finding the right feature set, look into feature engineering and building up your feature store with the right ones that have the maximum impact. So building on to that example that I said, if you take tons and tons of and build a data warehouse of all your sensor data, it's useless. It doesn't mean anything, right? So find the right one, yeah.
And that harkens back, I think, Jose, maybe you can talk a little bit about this, where we are now seeing a trend away from just big data. And this is one area that small and medium businesses are able to come into the fray a lot more aggressively now, to using ensemble modeling and also using, you know, what we call small and wide data. So lots of little bits of information from maybe untraditional sources. So Jose, what's the balance for you guys been in using your large historical data set versus some of the newer sources that may be smaller, but still in conjunction with other data sources really helpful?
That's a great question, Kimberly, and I guess it depends on the use case that you're working on. But for example, I'll give an example on small data that it's has proven to yield extremely high returns on investment. And it's the type of data, and let's imagine that you have a small firm that doesn't really has a data warehouse, but and it's used to when they are going to do an intervention. Imagine that they are going to do a 5% discount or cashback on the purchases done by the customer during Christmas. So typically they would do that for all their customers. And something very simple that you can do is that you separate some customers on which you offer that offer, and you so that's the treatment group, and then you have a control group on which you don't do that offer. And so and after that, you compare what are the KPIs between one group and another, and you understand what's the true effect of your intervention, provided so that control and treatment group are kind of like similar groups, and that you can do that very precisely in a very you can sophisticate that example that I said, selecting the people in one group or another, but doing the most simple thing is just a random pick up the people that are in one group and another, and then you compare, and you can do something as simple as just compare the difference in means between the KPIs that you have, and then you can, if you're really more professional, you can do it in a more sophisticated way. But that's an example of a small set of data that can yield a lot of information if what you're doing is correct. And if you're probably more ambitious, you don't do only one intervention and one control group, but probably you would like to try different things at the same time with different customers. And some you're having information. It's like your customers, you're listening actively to your customers on what they are expecting and how you want what is a relevant value proposition that you're giving to them, and what is the true lifts that you're having. So, and then if you want to do something like the GDP example that I told you about, then yeah, you need massive amounts of data, and but I guess it depends on the firm and their objectives, their business objectives.
Unfortunately, we are just about out of time, and there's so many terrific questions here. I'm really sorry we can't get to all of them. Thank you, Kimberly, Ritu, and Jose, for another terrific session, and thank you in the audience for all those great questions. Over the next few days, please look for a feedback survey we'll send via email. We greatly appreciate your thoughts and opinions. A recording of this program will be available within 3 to 4 business days, and we'll let you know how to access that. We'll send a link to the recording as well as a PDF of the slides. And a few people asked about accessing the previous webinars, and to find those, you can go to sloanreview.mit.edu/tag/webinars-videos. Again, it's sloanreview.mit.edu/tag/webinars-videos. So a final thank you to SAS for sponsoring this webinar. We hope you'll all join us May 20th for the next and final installment in this series on adopting AI, where we'll cover how to put all the pieces together. Thank you all so much.